A woman was abandoned by her mother at the age of 4, who chose to live out a wild passion. Years later, when she found her again, she couldn't believe it. Meiling was sitting in her small living room in Beijing. The room bathed in soft light filtered through beige linen curtains. The decor was simple, but every object held special meaning, many of them memories of her childhood. She was looking at the coffee table, where several photographs were arranged, some framed, others just propped up. Each image told a story, but one in particular caught her attention. It was an old photo of her mother, Isabella, taken on a sunny day, with a radiant smile that seemed to light up the world around her. Meiling felt a lump form in her throat as she gazed at the familiar face, so distant and yet so present in her memory. "Why did you leave me, Mom?" Meiling murmured to herself, her voice barely a whisper. She couldn't understand how the woman who had given birth to her could have disappeared from her life, choosing to live in adventurous love, leaving behind only a shadow of memories and a vast emptiness. The pain of her mother's absence had always accompanied her, like a silent shadow that never left her. Rising, Meiling approached the table and picked up the photograph, gently brushing the dusty surface with her fingers. "You were so beautiful," she thought, imagining what her life would have been like if her mother had been by her side. The image transported her to a time when things were simpler, when laughter and hugs seemed eternal. But the years passed, and she was raised by her father, June, who always told her a story that over time became the only truth she knew. That afternoon, while preparing for work, Meiling decided she needed answers. She couldn't continue living with the uncertainty about what really happened to Isabella. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was June's deep, authoritative voice sounding on the other end of the line. "Meiling, do you still have your mother's photo?" he asked, as if he knew her thoughts were miles away. "Yes, Dad," she replied, trying to hide the sadness invading her chest. "I was just looking at it now. Don't forget what I taught you. She abandoned you, Meiling. She ran away with another man. You can't let that affect you." The firmness in June's voice was undeniable, but at the same time, the sadness behind his words was palpable. Meiling knew he believed the story he had told all his life. He had always convinced her that Isabella left her for a lover, a selfish decision that made her suffer. But the truth never seemed to fit well in that narrative. "I know, Dad, but what if there's more? I can't come to terms with it. Why did she never want to hear from me again?" The doubt escaped her lips, and she immediately regretted it. She knew this was not a topic to discuss with June. "Meiling, don't start with that. Your mother made her choices. I don't want to hear this story or her name here anymore. Now, you need to move on. Life is too short to be stuck in the ghosts of the past." June's voice grew more impatient, and she could hear the tension rising. "You have a good job, friends, and a future ahead of you. Don't let this story ruin your life." "I just want to understand, Dad. I can't let this go without at least trying to discover the truth." Meiling felt her heart race. The conversation was becoming an emotional battle, and she didn't want to fight with him. But there was something inside her that drove her to seek answers. "Then do what you think is best. But don't come to me saying you regret searching for the truth. I don't want you to hurt yourself again." June hung up, and Meiling was left standing there, looking at the phone, a mix of frustration and sadness washing over her. What she really wanted was to understand her mother's story, why a mother would abandon her child and never seek news. That tore at her heart. After a difficult day at work, where the hours seemed to drag on, Meiling returned home exhausted, but her mind was more alert than ever. As she passed by the bookshelf, something glimmered among the tangle of covers and spines. It was a dusty book she hadn't seen in years. Curious, she pulled it out, and as she opened it, a yellowed letter fell to the floor. With trembling hands, Meiling bent down to pick up the paper. It was handwritten, the elegant and flowing script sending a shiver down her spine. It was a letter from her mother. With her heart pounding, she began to read. "My dear Meiling, if you're reading this, it means time has passed, and I haven't been by your side as I would have liked. It's not for lack of love that I'm far away, but out of a desperate need to protect you in your life. There are things you can't yet understand. Life in China is full of rules and limitations, and I didn't want you to be imprisoned by them and suffer the consequences for things that were not your burden to bear. One day, I hope we can meet again. You are in my heart, my eternal love. There was a place that was always special to me, a refuge where we could reunite. But for now, you need to understand that I will always be with you, even from a distance. You are the light of my life, and always will be. With love, your mother. Tears streamed down Miling's face as she absorbed each word. The pain of knowing that her mother still loved her, even after all those years, and the revelation that there was a special place for a possible reunion, left her in a whirlwind of emotions. But doubt still lingered. What could that place be? And why had her mother never tried to find her or given any sign of life? Miling sat on the floor, clutching the letter tightly, as if it were a priceless treasure. The truth, which had always seemed so distant, was now within her reach, and she felt a growing determination in her heart. Perhaps it was time to unravel the secrets surrounding her family, to understand why Isabella made the choices she did. If there was a chance of finding her mother, Miling was willing to take the risk, even if it meant confronting her father and the truth he had tried so hard to hide. In the following days, as Miling reflected on the content of the letter and the possibility of finding her mother, she came across an international television show that had recently gained notoriety. This show aimed to reunite families who had been lost over time, often due to extreme circumstances such as wars, migrations, and in some cases, difficult decisions like Isabella's. The show, called Unlikely Reunions, aired on a television network in Italy and featured heartwarming stories of people who, after years of searching, finally found their loved ones. In each episode, the host would read letters, show videos, and accompany the participants on their emotional journeys until the moment of reunion. Miling watched all this with her heart racing, feeling that this might be the opportunity she had long hoped for. After several weeks of mulling over the idea, Miling decided she had to try. She wrote a letter to the show, telling her story and attaching the photo of Isabella she had found. She explained that she had believed her whole life that her mother had abandoned her, but recently discovered a letter suggesting a completely different story. The hope that her mother was still alive and perhaps willing to reunite with her motivated Miling to send the letter. It didn't take long for Miling to receive a response. A producer from the show contacted her, saying they had found someone in Italy who matched Isabella's description. The show's team had conducted a preliminary investigation, and although they couldn't guarantee it was the same person, the evidence was strong enough to warrant moving forward. It was this positive response that led Miling to embark for Rome. The idea of seeing her mother again filled her with a mix of anxiety and hope, but she was determined to move forward, no matter what she found. Miling gazed at Rome's airport with a mix of anxiety and excitement. The atmosphere was full of people, sounds, and smells that were completely new to her. The young woman, who had lived her entire life in China, felt out of place, but the determination in her heart pushed her forward. There was a truth to be discovered, and she was willing to face any challenge that came her way. When Miling arrived, a cool breeze enveloped her, bringing with it the aroma of coffee and fresh bread. She didn't speak Italian, but she had memorized a few phrases that would help her, she thought. With her mother's letter in hand, Miling felt like an explorer in search of lost treasure. Her heart pounded in her chest as she headed for the airport exit. What would she find? The image of Isabella was a mix of hope and fear. The show had arranged for Miling to be taken to a significant location in Rome, a cafe that, according to the production team, might trigger memories for her mother. Upon arriving in the city, she was taken to the cafe by a team member, where the long-awaited reunion would be filmed. The anticipation was overwhelming, but Miling knew she had to keep moving forward. As she stepped outside, the sun shone brightly, illuminating the streets of Rome in all its glory. The ancient buildings surrounded her, and the beauty of the place almost made her forget the reason she was there. However, the need to find her mother brought her back to reality. With an old photo in hand that she had secretly taken from her father's trunk, showing the location of a cafe her parents frequented when they were dating in Italy, Miling decided to head to the place mentioned and also indicated by the show. a small nearby square where this famous cafe was located. With each step, Myling felt the weight of longing and curiosity. The path was full of tourists, but her mind was far away, thinking of Isabella. What would she be doing now? Was she still alive? Would she remember me? Does she still love me? These questions echoed in her mind. After a long walk, Myling finally arrived at the square. The place was charming, full of lush trees and wooden benches. The sound of laughter and conversations filled the air. There was something welcoming there, something that made her feel a little more at home, even though she was so far from Beijing. Myling decided to enter the cafe, which was crowded. A show crew member identified themselves and welcomed her. The tables were full of people chatting animatedly, and the aroma of fresh coffee enveloped her like a hug. She ordered an espresso and sat in a corner, indicated by the crew member, who informed her that her mother might be there. As she observed the faces around her, a woman with long brown hair caught her attention. The woman's features were familiar in some way, and a chill ran down her spine. It can't be, she thought. Myling's heart raced. The woman was laughing, chatting with a friend, and her expression was full of life. Maybe it's just my imagination, she thought, but the idea wouldn't leave her mind. She asked the crew member, who nodded that it could indeed be her, and so she decided to approach, her heart beating faster with each step. "Excuse me," Myling began, her voice trembling slightly. The woman turned, her brown eyes meeting Myling's. "Yes," the woman responded, a gentle smile on her lips. You look a lot like someone I know," Myling said, hesitating, but feeling an inexplicable force pushing her forward. The woman looked at her with curiosity. "Oh, really? May I ask who?" "Is my mother, Isabella." The name left her lips like a prayer, filled with hope and pain. The woman was silent for a moment that seemed like an eternity. Her expression changed from curiosity to recognition, and then finally to emotion. "Myling?" "Finally," she said, her voice choked. The world around them disappeared. Myling felt time had stopped. It was as if reality had melted away, and all that mattered was that moment. "Mom!" The words slipped out almost like a whisper. Isabella stood up quickly, and the two embraced tightly. It was a hug full of tears, longing, and a love that transcended the years of separation. "Oh, my dear," Isabella said, her voice trembling. "I never stopped loving you. Never." Tears streamed down Myling's face as she pulled back slightly to look into her mother's eyes. "Why did you leave? Why did you never try to speak to me again? Why did you choose to run away with a lover instead of staying with me? Why did you abandon us?" The pain and confusion were evident in her words. Isabella took a deep breath, trying to find words that made sense. "I never ran away with a lover or abandoned you. That's not true. Your father must have told those lies. I'm so sorry for that, Myling. I had to flee, it's true, but it wasn't with a lover. It was a matter of life and death. I had no choice," she explained, her voice laden with emotion. "I was forced to leave China because of the pregnancy, my second child. At that time, having more than one child was forbidden. I couldn't risk his life. Your father made up those lies. If the government had found out we were having a second child, he could have been killed, and you would have been at risk too." "I have a brother?" Myling asked, stunned, the revelation hitting her like a wave. "Yes, Mateo. He's the reason I fled. I needed to protect him, and that meant leaving you to avoid a hunt against our family and putting your life in danger," Isabella replied, tears streaming down her face. "Believe me, it was the hardest decision of my life. Why did you never send anything? Never try to contact me?" Myling asked, her voice trembling. "I tried, Myling, but my letters kept returning as undeliverable. God knows how many times I tried to get news of you. A photo, to hear your voice, a cloth with your scent. I tried countless times, but China's closed regime for a foreign woman is not kind," Isabella explained, the sadness in her voice evident. Myling felt a mix of emotions. The pain of her mother's absence was deep, but now there was understanding. "I didn't know. I just wanted you back. I thought you had forgotten me." "Never. I always thought of you, every day," Isabella said, holding her daughter's hands. "When I learned you were well, my heart filled with hope. Since then, I've dreamed of this moment. The cafe around them continued to function, but for Myling and Isabella, everything seemed to have stopped. The crew member from the show, moved by the reunion, decided to leave them alone. The recording had been enough and would air at the appropriate time. The connection between mother and daughter was palpable, and the years of separation seemed to melt away in that conversation. "Let's sit and talk," Isabella suggested, pulling Myling to a quieter table. "There's so much I need to tell you." Myling nodded, feeling closer to her mother than ever. They sat down, and Isabella ordered 2 coffees while Myling watched, still trying to process the reality of the situation. Time seemed to stretch, and every second was precious. "Tell me about your life in China," Isabella began, her eyes shining with curiosity. Myling hesitated, but soon began to talk about her childhood, her life with June, and the memories that accompanied her. With each word, Isabella listened intently, interjecting with questions and comments. "And you? What's your life like here?" Myling asked, wanting to understand the woman who had left her life so long ago. Isabella smiled, a smile that mixed sadness and joy. "It's a hard life, but I did the best I could for Mateo, always thinking of you. I dreamed of the day you could meet, to know you have a family, each other. He's an amazing boy, and I hope one day you can meet him too." The conversation flowed, and the 2 women lost themselves in stories, laughter, and tears. Myling felt she was finally finding what she had always sought, a piece of her story, her identity. There, in that cafe in Rome, under the soft afternoon light, both of their lives were about to change forever. Myling sat at the table in that cozy cafe, the aroma of fresh coffee mixing with the scent of Italian pastries. The place was small but inviting, with dark wooden tables and walls adorned with black and white photographs of Rome, capturing moments from times past. She looked at Isabella, who sat across from her, her gaze lost in thought. The woman's eyes sparkled, but there was a shadow of pain in her expression. "You don't know the joy it is to have you here, Myling. God heard my prayers. I never forgot you, my daughter. You must know this. The Chinese regime is not kind to foreigners. My heart kept bleeding all this time. I can't believe I'm here with you, finally having you close to me," Isabella said, breaking the silence that seemed to have settled between them. Her voice was soft, but carried a weight that Myling couldn't ignore. I don't know what to say," Myling replied, struggling to process everything she had just heard. The revelation of who her mother was, the whole context of her departure, that she wasn't Isabella's only child. It was a lot of information to process. "And now I have a brother? Mateo? How did you manage to raise him alone?" Isabella sighed, her eyes drifting for a moment, as if searching for the words in some distant place. "It was hard, Myling. After I fled China, I was alone, completely without support. In Italy, things weren't easy. I had to start over. My heart bled knowing you were left behind, but I was sure your father and grandmother would raise you well. But not being able to see you grow, not even having news of you, shattered my soul. When I found out I was pregnant with Mateo, I knew I had to be strong for him and for you. In the region we lived, it wasn't possible to have 2 children, and the preference was especially for the male child. I couldn't lose either of you. It would have been too much for my soul. I left carrying Mateo hidden in my womb so that he wouldn't suffer anything, nor would you. Your father certainly took care to spread those lies, that I fled with a lover to justify even that the child wasn't his. A heavy lie, but in some way, it protected us all." Myling felt a lump form in her throat. "And you never thought of looking for me? I always waited, always dreamed of finding you again. I dreamed of you every day," Isabella replied, her voice trembling. "I tried many times to reach your father, your grandmother, but I never got a response. When I left China, I became a persona non grata to the regime. I couldn't return without consequences. My letters were returned undelivered. My heart bled and longed for news of you. I didn't know anything," Myling murmured, feeling a mix of anger and sadness. "I grew up believing you had abandoned me and left us for an overwhelming love for another man. That didn't make sense to me. All I wanted was to understand why you really left. Isabella leaned forward, her expression full of empathy. "Miling, I never wanted to leave you. The decision to flee wasn't easy. In fact, it was a matter of survival. The Chinese government was becoming increasingly strict with the population control policy. I couldn't risk your lives, not after everything I had already faced." "So, Mateo, he doesn't know about me?" Miling asked, a mix of curiosity and concern invading her being. "No, of course he knows. I raised him with the hope that one day we could reunite, but I always hesitated to tell him the whole truth, the context about your father. It's too painful for me. He's only 20 years old. I wanted him to have a normal childhood. I did what I could," Isabella replied, looking at the ground as if weighing each word. "Your brother is studying medicine. He wants to be a doctor to save lives. He studies day and night. He hardly has time to visit me here in Italy. Every hour he's in a different place. But I always dreamed of the day you two would meet, and I hope it's soon." Miling was stunned. "You didn't know where he is?" "No, Miling," Isabella replied with sadness in her eyes. "He's more independent and very focused on his studies. I miss having a family nearby, but he's at the age where he needs to find his own way." "And now, what are we going to do?" Miling asked, her voice almost a whisper. The weight of the revelation still oppressed her, and she felt lost in the midst of conflicting emotions. Isabella smiled sadly. "Now, we need to enjoy our time together. I want to make up for some of the time my soul has felt lost all these years." While the two spoke, Mateo was focused on his medical studies. He was graduating in the United States. He was in a classroom, listening attentively to his professor, but his mind was wandering. He looked up at the sky through the window, the sunlight filtering through the clouds. The feeling that something was about to happen enveloped him. When the professor mentioned the importance of family relationships in medicine, Mateo felt his heart race. He had always known that family was fundamental, but he had never had a clear idea of what that meant. There was a gap in his life, an empty space he couldn't fill. And suddenly, he remembered the conversation he had with his mother about China, his place of origin. There was something in her gaze, a concern he hadn't been able to decipher at the time. "Mateo?" The professor's voice brought him back to reality. "Are you with me?" "Sorry, Professor. I was just thinking," Mateo replied. "Try to focus." But the feeling that he needed to discover more about his family grew with each passing minute. After class, Mateo decided to take a walk around the campus. As he walked, he felt his phone vibrate in his pocket. It was a message from his mother. "Mateo, we need to talk. There's something important you need to know." "Where are you, my son?" The message made his heart race. What could be so important? He decided he couldn't wait any longer. With a mix of anxiety and determination, he began to search for a quiet place where he could call Isabella. Meanwhile, in Rome, Miling and Isabella were walking through the streets, each step carrying the weight of Isabella's story. They visited a small park where Isabella used to think about Miling. The place was filled with colorful flowers, and the sound of children playing reminded Miling of the childhood she hadn't had. "I used to come here to dream," Isabella said, looking around. "It was a place where I could imagine a better future for us. I wish I had been here," Miling confessed, feeling the pain of loss in her voice. "I wish I had lived that childhood by your side." Isabella turned to Miling, her eyes full of love and regret. "You don't know how much I regret it. If I could go back in time and do things differently. But you have to understand that no matter how hard I tried, I did what I thought was best at the time." The two women sat on a park bench, and Isabella began to talk about Mateo's early years. "He's a good boy, very intelligent. He always had a generous heart, even when he faced difficulties. What pained me most was the day I could bring you together. My family." Miling took a deep breath, trying to process everything that was happening. The idea of having a brother was both exciting and distressing. And more than anything, she wanted Mateo to accept her, as she had always dreamed of being accepted by her mother. "Let's enjoy the moment," Isabella suggested, her gaze firm. "We need to live in the now. Our lives have already been kidnapped by circumstances. The past is behind us, and what we have now is our present. And I bless this present that life has given me to be here with you. I am eternally grateful to have finally fulfilled my dream of seeing you again, Miling. We are here now, and that is what really matters." "You're right," Myling agreed, feeling more confident. "We're together now." The two women stood up and began to walk again, immersed in conversations about the future, about what their lives would be like now that they were together. The atmosphere of the park, full of life and color, reflected the hope of a new beginning. They were ready to face whatever came their way, united by love and truth. Myling felt that, finally, she was beginning to find her place in the world, and the journey to discover her family had just begun. Mateo arrived at the college to pursue his dream with his heart racing, a mix of anxiety and expectation pulsing through his veins. Since he had learned of Myling's existence, his sister, through the phone call from his mother, an uncontrollable urge to find her accompanied him with every step. He was far away, but he really wanted to know his roots, his sister, his father. He calmed his mind, his heart. He settled into a student residence near the campus, where he would begin his medical specialization classes. The structure was simple but welcoming, and Mateo felt a little closer to his goals. His heart was hopeful. He would find his sister as soon as classes were over. He knew that she now had contact with their mother. He could hardly believe that after so much time, their lives were connected again. Anxiety consumed his soul. That night, as he looked out the window of his room, watching the city lights shining under the moon, he thought about how life had led him there. He was achieving his dream of becoming a doctor, saving lives, perhaps driven unconsciously by everything his mother went through while pregnant with him. He didn't yet know about this context, but he nurtured strongly within himself the desire to save people, to ease their pain, and to make the world a better place. Perhaps in this unconscious quest to soothe his own soul and the emptiness he cradled in his heart. Mateo had always known that life at home was marked by the absence of a father of siblings. He felt it deeply and always longed to know his family. But this matter robbed him of peace, and he had to focus on his studies. The next day, Mateo began exploring the campus and its surroundings, focused on being the best medical student possible. He felt a bit lost among the new faces, his new reality, but he was determined. He knew he would manage, one way or another. However, determination pushed him forward. Meanwhile, Myling was back in Beijing. She had just received troubling news about her father Jun's health. Her heart was torn. The pain of her mother's absence and the frustration with the lies she had heard all her life weighed on her shoulders. If Jun was sick, she needed to find him and confront him. She needed to know the truth, not just about Isabella, but about everything he had hidden. How could he deprive me of all this? Myling thought as she looked out the window of her apartment. The city was alive, full of people and stories, but to her, everything seemed empty. Determined to return home, Myling quickly packed her things. The image of her mother accompanied her, now with a face, form, and scent, no longer just a ghost. With one last look at the photographs decorating her wall, a hug that warmed her heart, she left home, feeling more determined than ever. When she arrived home, Myling noticed the tense atmosphere. The house, which had always been a refuge, now seemed oppressive. Jun was on the couch, pale and visibly weakened. Her heart sank at the sight of him like this, but the need for answers outweighed her concern. "Dad," she called, her voice trembling. Jun turned slowly, his tired eyes fixing on his daughter. "Myling, you came back." "Yes, I came back. We need to talk. You need to tell me the truth about my mother, about everything that happened," she said, her voice firm despite the storm of emotions overwhelming her. Jun sighed, his expression contorting in pain. "You don't understand." "Yes, I do. I understand that you lied to me my whole life. I need to know what happened to her. Why did you let her go? Why did you make up so many lies?" Myling's tone grew more intense, her frustration taking over. "I try to protect you, Myling. You don't know what was happening," Jun replied, his voice choked. "Protect? Or hide? You never let me know the truth. I grew up without a mother, thinking she preferred to be with another man rather than with me, her daughter. And now that I found out she's alive, you still can't tell me the truth." Myling's anger was boiling over. Jun closed his eyes for a moment, as if searching for the courage. "Isabella, she left for a reason. It wasn't because of a lover. It was for you and your brother, Myling. She did it to protect you. Myling's eyes widened in disbelief. Protect us from what? What did you do? Why didn't you tell me before? I was a government spy. I had information that could have put our lives at risk. When Isabella became pregnant a second time, she couldn't have that child. My heart burned, but I worked for the government. I had no choice. I was responsible for denouncing those who were violating these population control rules, and I was the one breaking them. It was our family. I couldn't lie to the government. I was being watched. I could have faced severe penalties, and so could you. It would have been the ultimate betrayal. She decided to leave, to go into hiding. I made up the story about the lover, so that if word got to the authorities about the second child, he wouldn't be mine. And you wouldn't suffer any consequences, nor would he. And I couldn't stop her from leaving, June confessed, his voice trembling. His words echoed in Myling's mind like a distant echo. A government spy? So, you were lying to me about all this? I did what I did to keep you, your mother, and your brother safe. We were completely monitored. We always were. I loved Isabella, but the situation was out of control. She had to leave, June explained, his eyes filled with tears. You can't just tell me you did this out of love and expect me to accept it. You destroyed my life. Myling felt the pain growing inside her, a mix of anger and sadness. June stood up with difficulty. Myling, please try to understand. I wasn't a good father. I know that now. But the truth is that Isabella never wanted to leave you. She always loved you, and so did I. The circumstances didn't favor us, and we owed obedience to the government. Silence hung between them, a chasm of hurt and mistrust. Myling felt a chill run down her spine as she realized the conversation was taking a turn she hadn't expected. June's words made her question everything she had believed up until now. The idea of a mother who loved her, who had always been there but had been forced to leave with a lie forged, was a heavy burden to bear. And now, what do I do with this? Myling murmured, feeling lost. I want to live with my mother, but you're here too, and I don't know how to deal with this. June approached, his hand extended. Myling, I'm not the father you thought I was, and I'm not that hard man from the past anymore. I want you to know that I'm here to help you. I was hurt by her abrupt decision. She chose to stay away, but then I understood. And I made up the story about the lover so that there wouldn't be consequences for all of us. I don't want to stop you from being with your mother anymore. At that moment, the ground beneath Myling's feet seemed to collapse. She was torn between the love for a father who had betrayed her and the hope of being with the mother she had always longed for. But the conversation was interrupted by a sudden cry. June collapsed, falling to the floor, and Myling's world went dark. Dad, she screamed, running to him. Her heart pounded as she tried to wake him, but June was unconscious. Emotions overwhelmed her, and the reality of what was happening hit her like a punch in the stomach. Not knowing what to do, she grabbed her phone and called for emergency help, tears streaming down her face. Please, come quickly. My father, he's old, he passed out. Myling pleaded, her voice choked. Desperation consumed her, and she didn't know what the future held. While waiting for the ambulance, Myling's mind wandered. What would happen now? The entire story involving her mother, and now a race against time to save her father. Her heart tightened, and she could only think of the worst. The hospital was filled with a tense silence, broken only by the distant sound of machines and the murmurs of nurses hurrying down the corridors. Myling sat on a hard chair, her hands clasped, and her eyes fixed on the emergency room door. Her heart was pounding. She needed news about her father. When the door opened, a young doctor with dark hair and expressive eyes emerged, a look of concern on his face. Are you a relative of Mr. June? Mateo asked, his voice soft but trembling. Yes, I'm his daughter, she replied, trying to maintain her composure. I'm Dr. Mateo. She hesitated for a moment, as if searching for the right words. Mateo? Her mother had said that was her brother's name. Could it be a coincidence? She no longer hesitated. Are you Italian? Mateo nodded and replied, Yes, I was born in Italy and raised by my mother, Isabella, but my roots are here in China. I never knew my father and sister, who were Chinese. Myling couldn't believe it. She was standing in front of her brother in China. He, unknowingly, was taking care of their father. Myling, in a burst of emotion, told him with tear-filled eyes, "We are siblings. You are Isabella's son, our mother. This can't be a coincidence. I'm Myling, your older sister. I was just in Italy to meet our mother. Mr. June, who was admitted here, is our father." The doctor was stunned, seeing everything spin around him. He couldn't believe he was finally finding his origins. He had always dreamed of this. Deciding to specialize in medicine in China wasn't by chance. But he didn't know they lived in Beijing and that he could find them so quickly. His gaze lost for a moment. "I always knew I had a sister and a father. Our mother spoke of you, but I never knew how to find you. Now, here we are, in such a difficult moment." It's true. She took a deep breath, trying to control her emotions. "My father, he's not well. I don't know what's going to happen." Mateo approached, his eyes full of understanding. "We're in this together. We can face this as siblings, even if it's in the midst of chaos. A fellow surgeon is taking care of our father. Let's wait." Those words were like a balm for Myling's soul. It was the kind of support she hadn't expected to find at that moment. They were connected by a bond that transcended pain and distance. But reality was about to unfold in an even darker way. The emergency room door opened again, and a doctor in a white coat appeared, his expression grave. "Relatives of Mr. June?" Both turned, their hearts racing. "Yes," they answered in unison. "I need you to come with me. We need to discuss his condition." The atmosphere grew oppressive. Myling followed the doctor, feeling the weight of the situation intensify with each step. Mateo was by her side, his presence an anchor in the emotional storm. They entered a small room, with chairs arranged in a circle and a table in the center. The doctor gestured for them to sit. "Mr. June is in critical condition. We performed surgery. He had a collapse. His heart was already weak. There are scars from previous heart attacks. He needs intensive care," the doctor began, his voice firm. "We're doing everything we can, but the situation is delicate." Myling felt a wave of despair. Will he recover? What exactly is happening? The urgency in her voice was undeniable, and Mateo placed his hand on her shoulder, offering some comfort. This wasn't the scenario he had imagined when meeting his father. "We're running all the necessary tests, but we need to talk about his medical history. There are some aspects we need to address," the doctor explained, looking directly at Myling. She swallowed hard, realizing the conversation wouldn't be easy. "What do you need to know?" "We need to understand what's been happening with him over the past few months. Any pre-existing conditions? Any medication he's been taking?" The doctor paused, observing the impact of his words. He didn't tell me much," Myling replied, her voice faltering. "He was always secretive about his health." Mateo intervened, his voice firm. "He was a spy, wasn't he? He didn't want you to know. He made choices to protect the family." The revelation hung in the air like a heavy cloud. Myling looked at Mateo, her eyes widening. "How do you know that?" "I found out about his past through our mother. She told me some things when I was younger, but I never knew the extent of it until now." The doctor, sensing the confusion and pain on their faces, decided to intervene. "I understand this is a difficult situation for both of you, but we need to focus on what we can do to help your father." After the conversation with the doctor, the tension in the air was palpable. As they waited for news about June, the need to unravel the secrets of the past became a priority. Myling looked at Mateo, who was lost in thought, and proposed, "We need to talk to him. We can't let him die without understanding the truth." Mateo nodded. "I agree. We'll wait until he's stable, and then we need to confront him. We need to know why he did what he did." The wait was agonizing. Every minute felt like an eternity, and Myling felt the anxiety growing inside her. Finally, the door opened again, and the doctor entered, his expression more relaxed. "He's stable now. We can allow you to see him, but only for a short time." Myling's heart raced. This was the chance she had been waiting for. With Mateo by her side, she followed the doctor to the room where June was being treated. Her father was connected to a series of machines, his skin pale and his eyes closed. The image was painful, and Myling hesitated as she approached. "He's alive," Mateo murmured, offering an encouraging smile. "Yes, but for how long?" Myling replied, her voice choked with emotion. "We need to be strong now," Mateo said, holding her hand. "He needs you, Myling, and we need to make him talk," Mateo added, the determination in his voice growing. "We may not have much time, but we can't let this opportunity slip away. There's a reason we're here together, Myling. We need to uncover the truth." The idea of confronting June made Myling's heart race. She knew she needed to know what really happened, but the fear of what she might hear was overwhelming. What if the truth is even more painful? She questioned, the vulnerability in her voice now more evident. Mateo held her hand, a simple gesture, but full of meaning. "Together, we can face any truth. You're not alone in this." "Hi, Dad," she said, her voice barely a whisper. June turned his head slowly, his tired eyes meeting Myling's. A weak smile appeared on his face, but there was no happiness she had hoped for, only deep sadness. Myling, he tried to sit up but quickly gave up, exhausted. "You came. I came because we need to talk. About the truth," Myling declared, her courage growing as she spoke. "About Mom. About everything." June closed his eyes, as if searching for the strength to face what was coming. "I did terrible things, and I don't know if I can make amends. But you need to understand that I loved you, and your safety was always my priority." "Protect us from what? From whom?" Myling asked, the frustration evident in her voice. "I didn't want you to get involved in something dangerous," June tried to explain, but his voice failed him. I was a government spy. I had to keep you away from danger. I didn't want you to get involved in something dangerous. I thought I was doing the best I could," he whispered, the pain in his voice undeniable. Mateo intervened, his voice firm. "You didn't protect us. You separated us. Why did you do that to our mother?" June looked at Mateo, his eyes filled with regret. "Who are you?" Myling, immediately wiping away the tears streaming down her face, said, "Dad, this is Mateo. My brother, your son, whom Mom protected. She raised him alone in Italy, and he became a doctor. I didn't know he was specializing here in China." June widened his eyes. "Is this true?" Mateo nodded. June closed his eyes, his expression full of deep pain. I'm sorry for everything. I just wanted you to be safe. Believe me." Mateo, who was standing beside Myling, took the initiative. "Mr. June, this isn't just a matter of love. We need to understand why you did what you did. What really happened to our mother? And to me? Why didn't you even want to meet me? You created terrible lies." June opened his eyes and, looking at Mateo, surprised by the young man's presence. "You're Mateo. My son." He seemed to have difficulty processing the information. "I never thought we'd meet like this." "Neither did I," Mateo replied, emotion in his voice mingling with firmness. "But now we need answers. Why did you force her to flee? Why did you never tell the truth?" Mr. June began. "I regret everything, but I couldn't do otherwise. The rules of that time were very strict. The regime was very dangerous. I belonged to it. I was a system spy, and we were watched all the time. There was no room for betrayal, and what happened in our family was seen as betrayal with a death penalty. What I did was to protect you, but I didn't know how to handle it." The confession was like a bomb, shattering the image Myling had of June, who at the same time understood the circumstances. It was a difficult fate for all of them. June, overcome with emotion, began to feel short of breath and collapsed. The machines beeped. He needed to rest and recover. While June was under the doctor's care, Myling and Mateo found themselves in a corner of the hospital waiting room. The environment, which should have been a place of healing, was filled with tension and uncertainty. The white, cold walls, illuminated by fluorescent lights, reflected the gravity of the situation. Myling was sitting on a plastic bench, her hands clasped, and her expression distant. Mateo, beside her, was staring at the floor, his mind racing with the storm of emotions accompanying him. "It's hard to believe he's my father, and at the same time a stranger." Mateo finally broke the silence, his voice soft but laden with pain. I still can't understand all this. I was raised in Italy. I don't understand this scenario. Myling took a deep breath, trying to organize her thoughts. I always thought he was the villain of my story, she said, looking at Matteo. But now, with everything I've discovered, I feel like there are layers I never imagined. He's not just the man who left me without a mother and brother, but also someone who lived under unimaginable pressure. Matteo nodded, his empathy for Myling growing with each word. Sometimes people make horrible choices for reasons we can't understand. Maybe he really acted out of love, even if it caused so much pain. Love? Love shouldn't cause pain, Myling retorted, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. He destroyed our family, Matteo. Yes, he destroyed it, but he also protected what was left of it, Matteo said, his voice firm. If he was really being threatened, maybe the only way out he saw was to keep us all apart. Matteo and Myling exchanged a look, a silent understanding between them. Together, they could face the truth, no matter how difficult it was. And even though June's fate was uncertain, they were determined not to let the mistakes of the past define their future. As the hospital light flickered, Myling felt a new hope grow inside her, just like Matteo. Finally, the siblings were able to meet. A new life was unfolding now. And even though they both still harbored deep resentment toward their father and the system, they understood the pain that tore their souls, all of theirs. They were all victims of it, even though they felt great resentment and wanted to blame their father. Life had not been kind to them, but it had certainly built strong people, and now they could unite. Now they would all be close to each other's hearts and ready to start a new story.